Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stephen Kingcast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King. Each week, I will review one entry in the bibliography of Stephen King in the chronological order of publication. What I am doing this week, actually, I am re-releasing an episode of the original adaptation of The Running Man, the one starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. And the reason why I am re-releasing it is because um, when I originally reviewed that movie and released it, this was prior. I mean, this was a while ago. It was a long time ago, and um, there were a lot of things that had not happened in the world of politics since then. So, in the decade that you know it's been just about a decade since I had originally reviewed that novel. Politics completely has changed, and there is now a very more insidious form of politics that has to do with ratings. It has to do with celebrity. It has to do with propaganda, which is really on the forefront of things. So a lot of what we saw in that original Running Man unfortunately really aligns with what we see today in politics. That grandstanding, the really the completely ignoring humanity and putting other people in danger for our own entertainment and vilifying people for our entertainment. It really has become what 2026 is, in a way that when the movie originally came out, it was a recognizable to somewhat, to somewhat degree of a reality, but like all dystopian fiction and futuristic settings, we weren't there yet. You could see where it was going, and this original movie, you know, used the visual language of the time with game shows and professional wrestling and 1980s action movies to really tell this story. But with our current reality being what it is, these elements are still on display. This belief in what strength really looks like, in many ways. Current politics and current reality and control is based on this idea of what of what strength is, as was once defined by Arnold Schwarzenegger. So that's another interesting way of looking at it, which isn't to say that Arnold Schwarzenegger is a perpetuate of this type of belief, but I think that others have taken it upon themselves to tout this as what this is what real power is. But I just wanted to re-release this, because I just gave a review of the more recent adaptation of The Running Man, starring Glenn Powell, directed by Edgar Wright, and I feel as though this this more recent adaptation, though it has a lot of creative power behind it, really fails to capture the critique of society and the commentary on society and the absurdity that of the dystopian reality of the Running Man, the way that this original adaptation did, and how prescient this original Running Man actually seems to be. At the time, I think that it seemed kind of to be one of the lesser Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, and it seemed to be one of the lesser action movies of its day. But looking back at it now, not only is it just an incredibly fun movie, it's a wonderful movie to be able to revisit. It is so gloriously 1980s, but it also really seems true in a way for today that it might not had at the time. Um, I think often of RoboCop and what Paul Verhoeven was able to do with RoboCop, and have it be not only a kick-ass, 80s movie, but it's a movie about 80s movies. It is looking into the future. It is spoofing and satirizing elements of the genre and our society, while at the same time kind of pointing to where we are going. And I think that in some ways, The Running Man does the exact same thing. So, unfortunately, I don't think that Edgar Wright was able to do that with his version of The Running Man, but it makes me all the more impressed with the original Running Man starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, which, if nothing else, it's just a great time. It's a great time just sitting down and watching it. So if you haven't seen it, I strongly recommend it. If you liked the new movie, go back and get this throwback to 1980s movies of that is steeped in a tea of professional wrestling and American gladiators and the Family Feud. Also, speaking of the Family Feud, having Richard Dawson, I cannot say enough of how innovative and clever that casting was, and what a missed opportunity it would be to continue that line and honor what came before, and just have Steve Harvey have been the Coleman Domingo character in the recent one. You have this. I mean, literally, he is the host of the Family Feud. He is a recognizable face. Everyone loves Steve Harvey, and so to subvert that image that you have, it would have been a nice tribute to the original movie. All right, everyone. That's just the preface to what was a really fun review. Originally, in which I talk about a movie that I had a great time revisiting. So if you haven't seen it, please stop listening to this podcast and go out and watch it, and enjoy my review of The Running Man.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stephen Kingcast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King. Each week, I'll review one entry in the bibliography of Stephen King in the chronological order of publication. Or what this week, I should say the bibliography of Stephen King's alter ego, Richard Bachman. Today, I'm going to examine 1987's Arnold Schwarzenegger classic, The Running Man. Classic? I mean, does it really constitute being labeled a classic? I mean, here's the thing about The Running Man. It's not a good movie. It's a great movie, and it's an awful movie, all rolled up into one perfect snapshot of 1980s sensibilities. Now, I'm gonna talk a lot about The Running Man, but first, I just want to take this opportunity to read a listener email. As you know from earlier episodes, I really value getting emails from anyone that's listening, and as I record this, the Talisman review just came out, and the amount of downloads and listens for that particular episode was definitely the highest that I've had. So I just want to thank everyone for that. So here is a listener email from Jerry. First off, bravo! You do an amazing job at your reviews, and I love listening to them. I have since the first ones. Your Instagram posts of Nosferatu are the reason why I read that book. I was anxious to see what you had to say about it. I don't find many King fans in my world, so it's fun to listen to other people's opinions. Between you and a Dark Tower page on Facebook, it's about all I have in ways of King talk. My wife's an avid King reader as well, but slow going because of her time commitment to work. She's on her 6th reread of the Dark Tower, and this journey has taken her 9 months. I'm pushing for her to finish so I can get her to read some of the ones I have as of late. Joyland, Doohickey, Regulators, Nosferatu, Tommyknockers are all a few. Aside from my banter on about my King loneliness, LOL, I just wanted to know how stoked you were about Joe Hill's Pennywise reference, his True Knot reference, his making Colorado a powerful evil place much like his father and other Kingisms. I feel he's strengthened as a writer by acknowledging his deep connection he shares with his father, and it takes serious brass to be able to own that and say, so what? I have my own worlds, but there are also a lot of my father in them. It just really impressed me in his ability to playfully incorporate all the elements, stay true to Joe, and still show so much light of his father. Sorry, big rambled mess here. Just wanted to get it all out before I forgot something. Thank you so much for your podcast, and always remember, stand and be true. So, Jerry, thank you for writing in some of the books that you mentioned Joyland, Doomakey, Regulators. Those are ones that I can't wait to get to. Joyland, because I read it. I mean, it just came out a couple years ago, but I think that rereading it again, I'm going to have a lot to say. Doomakey is an interesting one because I did not like it upon the first reading. But like I've said with some of Stephen King's early to mid 2000 books, like Lisey's Story and Doomakey specifically, I didn't like them, but I also didn't go into it with an open mind, and being younger at the time of the release of these books, I wasn't in the right mindset. These are stories about being a little bit older and life at a different stage than I'm currently at right now. But, I had expected earlier King. I wasn't given earlier King, nor should I have received earlier King. So I want to go back with a much more objective mind and be able to really sink my teeth into those books. Regulators, I just can't wait because that's a book that nobody talks about. And it's very appropriate that I'll be talking, about Regulators today because we're still on the Richard Bachman train, and this is technically a Richard Bachman book. But Regulators is great. I personally read it, when it was released simultaneously with the publication of Stephen King's version of the same story, Desperation. I read Desperation first and then Regulators second. I think that maybe because I had read Desperation first, that was just where my preference was, but I love Regulators because I've reread it a couple times since then, and just the imagery alone is just so bonkers, so crazy, so imaginative. It's something that I would just love to see captured in film. I mean, just when you see the Regulators come rolling down that hill on that summer day, it just... I have that scene firmly entrenched in my head, and I know what it would look like if it was played out on the big screen. So I can't wait to reread that again so I can go into much more love and much more detail in a review. Wow, 6 times reading The Dark Tower. That is something. Tell your wife congratulations. I haven't heard that one before. That's a lot. That's great. I mean, I am going to be on maybe my 4th reread for books 1 through 4, I would say. I will be on my 2nd or 3rd. Yeah, I'll be on my 3rd reread of Wolves of the Kala and Song of Susanna. And by the time I get to The Dark Tower itself, it'll be my 2nd time reading it. So I am not there. But as my podcasts, I think, can attest to, there's definitely a lot of material in there that you won't be able to pick up the first time or second time. I mean, this is my 4th time around and I'm still picking things up. So that's great. Keep on going. So Jerry, thank you for writing in. Feel free to write in again. Just thank you for the email. Okay. So with the email over, now it's time to get back into what this is all about. We are talking today about The Running Man. And I think the biggest thing that we have to talk about in regards to The Running Man is the fact how different it is to the original novel. I mean, so far, I'd say that the only other movie that has differed as much from the source material has been The Shining. And if you had issues with how much Kubrick changed King's original text, then you probably hate The Running Man. I mean, with that said, the changes to The Running Man, it's not unexpected. It's 1987. You hire Arnold Schwarzenegger as your star. You're going to need to cater to the big action beats that 1987 requires. The novel was more of a thriller than anything else. And this is a 1980s action movie, and in that regard, it does not disappoint. The movie is ridiculous, and in all of the right ways. Whereas the novel kept the main character in the open world, this novel shoves Ben into boxed-off quadrants that resemble video game levels. It takes the sprawling, amazing race-type quest and converts it into a more recognizable for its time game show. Remember, at this time, game shows are what constituted as reality television. It didn't look like it does today. So it's no surprise that the conceit of the story is altered to resemble what's recognizable for its time. Similarly, the faceless black ops-styled hunters in the novel are made cartoonish and larger than life, which speaks directly to the wrestling boom of the 1980s. I'll get to the specific differences between the book and the movie at the conclusion of this review. In the meantime, because the movie is so different from the novel, I'm going to read the Wikipedia summary to provide context for my running thoughts. And typically during the movie reviews, I don't do this because I've just reviewed the books the week before. And for the most part, the book, plots and the movie plots are pretty similar. So that's why I've always avoided reading a summary of the events of the story for the movie reviews because they've just been so similar. But like I said, this is just so different. I feel like if I'm going to talk about the movie, I have to put it into context.
By 2017, following a worldwide economic collapse and resource scarcity, the United States has become a totalitarian police state. The government maintains control through propaganda, censoring unsanctioned art, music, and communication. The state-controlled broadcaster ICS runs the nation's most popular program, The Running Man, a game show in which prisoners can earn their freedom by surviving as runners against lethal stalkers. Captain Ben Richards is arrested after refusing orders to open fire on an unarmed food riot in Bakersfield, California. His fellow officers massacre the rioters and frame Richards for the incident, branding him as the Butcher of Bakersfield. 18 months later, Richard escapes from a prison labor camp with resistance fighters Harold Weiss and William Laughlin. They ask him to join their cause, but Richards declines, focusing only on surviving. Richard travels to his brother's former apartment, but discovers that ICS composer Amber Mendez now lives there after his brother was taken for re-education. Richard forces Amber to help him bypass airport security, but thinking he is the Butcher, she alerts the authorities. After his capture, Amber sees news reports falsely claiming that Richard murdered people during the incident and begins to doubt his guilt. Damon Killian, host of The Running Man, approaches Richards hoping to use his notoriety to revive the show's ratings. He threatens to send the recaptured Weiss and Laughlin into the game unless Richard agrees to participate. When the show begins, Killian betrays Richard by sending him, Weiss, and Laughlin into the game zone, an abandoned section of Los Angeles, via rocket sleds. The group is hunted by Sub-Zero, a hockey-themed stalker whom Richard kills, marking the first time a runner has ever killed a stalker. Meanwhile, Amber is caught retrieving the unedited Bakersfield footage and is sent into the zone. Killian dispatches two more stalkers, the chainsaw-wielding Buzzsaw and the electricity-shooting Dynamo. Richard kills Buzzsaw, though Laughlin is fatally wounded. Weiss discovers that the satellite uplink controlling government broadcasts is located inside the zone, and he cracks the access code for Amber to memorize before Dynamo kills him. Richard incapacitates Dynamo but refuses to kill him while defenseless, shocking the audience. When Killian secretly offers Richard a job as a stalker, Richards angrily refuses. Amber later finds the corpses of the show's supposed past winners, realizing their victories were fabricated, and Richard kills the flame-throwing, wielding Fireball. The audience begins cheering for Richards. Richards and Amber are found by Resistance leader Mick and are taken to the command center. Killian tries to force retired stalker Captain Freedom to fight Richards, but he refuses unless he can fight him honorably. ICS instead fabricates footage showing Freedom killing Richards and Amber. Seeing this broadcast, Richard realizes that the government must ensure they are never seen alive again. Using the satellite uplink codes, Mick transmits an expose revealing Killian and the government's lies, including the unedited Bakersfield footage, while Richard leads resistance fighters in a takeover of ICS to prevent the broadcast from being shut down. The resistance battles ICS security forces as the studio audience flees. Dynamo attacks Amber, but she activates the sprinkler system and electrocutes him. Richard confronts Killian, forces him into a rocket sled, and sends him into the game zone, where the uncontrolled vehicle crashes and explodes, killing him. Richards and Amber kiss as the crowd celebrates, and the broadcast goes offline.
As soon as the movie starts, immediately 80s music hits the screen. Right away, I'm telling you, I am hooked. It is so dated in the 1980s. It's like I'm time traveling. Sometimes you can make an argument that the more dated a movie is, it doesn't hold up to present day rewatching. Sometimes, though, I'm going to argue that the more dated a movie is, it gives it a little bit more of an endearing quality. I mean, between the outdated visuals of the running men and the very unflashy Star Wars scroll against the red screen, it places the movie in a very, very specific time period. It tells me, as a modern viewer, one who lived through this particular time period, by the way, what I should expect from this rewatch. Granted, and I just put it, up front right there because I lived through it, and this is kind of what I'm looking for now. There's a little bit of nostalgia. I mean, I get it, and I'll say that it's a very subjective experience. It's one that I lean into at this point rather than lean away from. But at the end of the day, as soon as it started, I wanted to watch more of it. So I don't know how objective this review is going to be. So the red fades to black, and a helicopter races across the sky, and we meet the man himself, the one, the only, former governor of California, the Terminator, Dutch, call him what you will. It is Arnold Schwarzenegger. He is our pilot. Already, it's a departure from the novel, with Richards refusing to open fire on rioting citizens. Now, remember that in the book, Ben Richards is a hard man with a hard life. He's lower class, living in an apartment with a wife who has to prostitute herself to make money. Most of this movie feels like a current-day parody of an 80s movie, don't get me wrong. But to be fair, the original novel reads like a parody of hard-boiled fiction. So whether it's unintentional or intentional, both versions play out like a satire in their own ways. What the initial change does is open up the movie with an immediate conflict. Whether it's good or bad, I mean, it's there. I mean, Arnold is ordered to open fire. He stands up to those orders. We see the harshness to this world and the inner strength of his character. Now, with that said, and this goes back to the endearing quality, I said endearing, not necessarily good. Arnold's line delivery comes across like an Arnold impersonation rather than Arnold acting. It might have less to do with Arnold himself, who, by the way, I'm just going to put it out there, I mean, the guy can act. He's demonstrated acting skills at this point, and I think that it has more to do with either director or the lines that he has to deliver. I think that people like to make fun of Arnold's acting ability, but he was a superstar for a reason, and it wasn't because of just his physique. It's the same reason why he was elected the governor of California. He's very charismatic. He's a very charming star. Maybe maybe some people think that the accent's a hindrance. Yeah, I'd say it's a strength. It gives him even more charm. And I'm not saying this because I'm a child of the 80s, and all I've ever known in life is a world where Arnold Schwarzenegger was an action star. I mean, I really think that he has chops. I just don't think that this opening is the best example of what he has to give. Now, with that said, the movie doesn't waste any opportunity to show us that they've hired Arnold Schwarzenegger. Because less than 3 minutes into the movie, Arnold walks across the screen carrying a steel beam like it's a pack of toilet paper. He's been a part of pop culture for so long, it's easy to forget how giant he actually was. Times have changed. Our expectations for action heroes, require actors to be in a certain shape, but it's not the same level of just big and looking giant. Times have changed. So, don't get me wrong. Whenever a Marvel movie comes out, that whoever the lead actor is, there's a certain expectation there that actor has to get into some serious shape. But it's a different, it's still big, but it's very, very shredded, right? At this point in his career, Arnold is still the Terminator. The dude is a physical monster. And if you're making an action movie in the 1980s and it stars Arnold Schwarzenegger, there's a few things that you have to include. One is a demonstration of Arnold's strength, which we've already witnessed with the steel beam. Two is a shootout. You need the shootout. And that occurs when Arnold and his gang attempt to break out of the facility. Third is the banter in between bursts of gunfire. 5 is probably the most important, and this movie has many of number 5 on display, and that's the one-liner. Like when Schwarzenegger lifts a man up in the air and asks him, "Need a lift?" before hurling him to his death. And I'm sorry, guys, whenever I reference a line, I know that you might want to hear it. I'm not going to do it in a Schwarzenegger impersonation. Another Schwarzenegger staple is the gore, which we get to see when Chico makes a run for it, even though the fields have yet to be deactivated. And we find out what happens when the collar starts to go off. We get a pretty good head explosion from it. Another thing about Arnold is that he's a bona fide, in real life, cigar aficionado, and he gets to chomp away on one in this movie. Now, when I think of Schwarzenegger and a cigar, I always think of Predator. I think that it's an effective look for the guy. One, it's manly. Now, he doesn't need props to look more masculine, but it doesn't hurt, too. And two, it's sophisticated. It gives his characters a little extra nuance that allows him to be more than just a vein-popping muscle mass freak. But it doesn't take long here in this movie. I'm talking about Arnold, but it's not just Arnold in this movie. You can't have a hero without the villain, and soon enough, we meet the movie's secret weapon, and that's Richard Dawson. Now, this is the kind of casting that I absolutely live for. It's a meta move that speaks to our own relationship with game shows and what was considered reality television at that point. And who better to play this role than the game show host, the smooth-talking, charming host of The Family Feud and star of Match Game, Richard mother-effing Dawson. That's who. He is so charismatic. He reminds me of Martin Sheen in The Dead Zone. Fast-thinking, fast-talking, and utterly dangerous. Now, as the movie was playing out, I realized that it was doing such a good job at world building. You don't need that opening exposition dump of a title scroll. The movie effectively creates a sense of setting, with commercials of the Running Man, shots of the futuristic cityscape, and Jesse the Body Ventura's Captain Freedom's Richard Simmons-esque workout video. You know, I mean, it really just establishes this world. You know, and then also we have the network studio. We just have posters for television shows like The Hate Boat, and then there's one about like Climbing for Dollars, which is just ruthless. And Killian at one point says, "Get me the Justice Department Entertainment Department." What a loaded sentence. The fact that the Justice Department has something called the Entertainment Department tells us so much about this world. I'm telling you, we don't need that opening scroll. Now, Arnold soon captures a hostage. Okay, Amber Mendez, the tenant of his brother's old apartment, and proceeds to flirt with her with romantic lines like, "Remember, I can break your neck like a chicken's, and later, I can strangle you in front of the whole audience." Arnold doesn't wait to be on TV to be the Running Man as he hightails it after Amber calls him out for being the infamous Ben Richards, fugitive extraordinaire. He's quickly captured and is introduced to Killian. It's a quick scene, it's a fun scene that allows both actors to trade barbs at one another. Arnold is forced into the Running Man when his friends are threatened, and he's then forced to undergo a quick but impactful barrage of medical treatments that are effectively portrayed as invasive. I don't know, maybe it's just how they shove the black rubber blocks into his mouth. I don't know what it is. You know, I've definitely seen other movies where the actors have to go through much more invasive treatments, but this one I thought was effective. Again, we get a sense of the coldness of the world like I was talking about before. Climbing for Dollars, which a man is just literally climbing a rope with dogs ready to tear him apart. And while watching television, Amber sees a news report that falsifies the truth from the day before, so we're getting the sense that something isn't right here. Now, The Running Man begins in full with an extended scene of dancers moving to synthtastic 80s beats, and we're introduced to our stalkers one by one, WWF style. The first being Buzzsaw, who lifts a motorcycle over his head. And then Killian comes out with the swagger of Bobby the Brain Heenan in his heyday, channeling his own experience from hosting talk shows while teasing the bloodthirst from the audience. He even gets to include his real-life trademark signature move, kissing the audience members. We get nice teases of what's to come through posters in the offices of the different American Gladiator-type stalkers, and soon after, Arnold signs his contract and plunges the pen into the goon's back, 80s style. It's perfect. It's such a great encapsulation of what makes an 80s movie an 80s movie. And whenever I think about The Running Man, it's that scene for whatever reason. I don't know, it stuck out to young me when I was a kid. It's just that's what comes to mind. Right before Ben is sent into the Running Man, Killian reneges on his deal and sends his two buddies into the game along with Arnold. And before Arnold is fired into the game, I mean, this is shameful here. I mean, he utters his most famous catchphrase of, "I'll be back." Now, naturally, you immediately think of the Terminator, right, when he says that. And in comparison, the Running Man will never hold up. So it was not a good idea by any means. But Killian's sly retort of "only in reruns" is a pretty awesome comeback. Now, what's interesting here is the depiction of the audience members. The story makes the point of really singling out either the middle-aged or elderly, and a lot of them women. So, I mean, it's just, you have your image of like your grandmother type or your mother type. So to see that type working against your associations or connotations, it's a pretty clever move. With Ben and his friends in the game, it's time to get into it, and this movie takes everything that's popular with the WWF and injects it with steroids, creating living, breathing, video game-styled bosses that you need to beat before moving on to the next level. The introductions to each of the villains are so cartoonish. It's gleefully cheesy. You know, and I was going to talk about how it incorporates the sensation of the American Gladiators, but when I checked the dates, the Running Man predates the American Gladiators by 2 years. Anyway, we meet Sub-Zero, a supervillain whose trademark is a razor-sharp hockey stick. I mean, it's so dumb. I mean, like, what can I say about it? I mean, I can't criticize it. I mean, that's the thing, is that, like, anyone that, like, critiques the movie, I think, negatively and says that that's a point against the movie, I think that you're kind of missing the point here. You know, I just mentioned how it takes on video game logic. I mean, this movie, more so than any actual video game adaptation, captures the feeling of being in a video game. You know, each boss that Arnold has to defeat comes equipped with a themed setting, as in the case of Sub-Zero, who batters the Running Man with a skating rink from hell and exploding hockey pucks. Again, guys, come on. I mean, this is so over the top, you can't criticize it. You just have to embrace it for what it is. And it's such a wonderfully dated look into the mindset of the 1980s. A decade which did the future so well, especially in retrospect, because the gluttony and balls-to-the-wall craziness of that decade feel futuristic. Especially the dystopian future that the 1980s like to depict in a lot of their movies, specifically this one. You know, Arnold gets rid of Sub-Zero with a roll of barbed wire to the throat, and he has not one but two quips. One being, he was a real pain in the neck, okay, which is the more effective one, and the other one, I have no idea what it means, okay? I don't know if I'm not hearing Arnold's delivery accurately because of the accent, or if the line is as bad as I think that it is, but he says, and I quote, "This is Sub-Zero, now he's plain zero." I don't know if that's what he says, but that line is so bad, I wish that they added the Debbie Downer wah, wah at the end. I just couldn't believe it. Oh my god. And then there's a scene, okay? The more I talk about this movie, the more I'm actually falling in love with it, and I loved rewatching it. And just so everyone knows, I watched a bunch of movies for review over the last couple of days, because I have actually 5 reviews to record, and I'm hoping to record all of them in the span of like a day and a half, the Running Man being the first of them. But anyway, I mean, of everything that I've watched and consumed over the last couple of days, the more I think about the Running Man, the more I'm actually enjoying the experience. Because there are scenes that just have these like little textures and flavors. There is a scene in this movie where Richard Dawson is yelling at the Justice Department, okay? And they're arguing about, what's going on in the Running Man, the fact that Sub-Zero has been killed, right? Okay, now in the middle of him yelling, he winds up getting into an argument with whoever is on the other line about Gilligan's Island. Okay, and it doesn't cut away. It gives Richard Dawson, I don't know, maybe it was ad-libbed, I don't know, but it gives him time to actually get into this argument. You only get one end of the conversation, but spends enough time for it to just be, to be just wacky enough. I mean, it is so random, okay, so weird that in the middle of this movie where you have these killers on ice skates and exploding hockey pucks, where the main villain can all of a sudden get into an irate argument about Gilligan's Island. It's one of the reasons I'm loving this movie more and more. And then we meet Buzzsaw and Dynamo. And Buzzsaw, by the way, looks like a 1990s comic book character, just completely decked out in chainsaws. And then Dynamo comes out singing opera while shooting electricity. Again, maybe you can say it's not for you. I'd be like, hey, you know what? It's doing something here. It's not for me. But I don't think that you can look at a movie like this and say that the movie's bad. Amber Mendez is then thrown into the Running Man and immediately catches up to the heroes. I don't know how, but she does. And soon after, Dynamo and Buzzsaw show up, each driving a different vehicle. Buzzsaw on a bike, and then Dynamo on what looks like a Boy Scouts boxcar racer. Buzzsaw proceeds to give me my favorite visual in the movie, Arnold being dragged behind him on the motorcycle. I can't do it justice, but you just need to see it. Just YouTube the scene. I'm sure that's out there. It's just Arnold is being trailed behind the motorcycle, and his head is just slamming just up and down in the dirt. And I don't know if my head is imagining it or not, but I can hear Arnold's wails of pain as his head is going up and down. He goes, again, I don't know if that happens or if it's his mind. It might be in my mind, but it's definitely something that had me cracking up. It's unintentionally hilarious. I loved every second. And Arnold flips Buzzsaw's bike. They engage into a hand-to-hand, or rather like a chainsaw-to-fist fight. And at one point, again, just little things I love about this movie, it's so clear that the chainsaw is not, it's not on. I mean, it's just a static chain. It's not doing anything. And in a force of wills, Arnold is clearly going to overpower Buzzsaw and rips him up from below. Dynamo, meanwhile, okay, I'm sure that others have written about the fact he looks like a light bright board, so I'm not going to say anything about it. But he electrocutes one of the characters, and he's undone by his own driving. Now, I love this movie because everyone speaks in snappy 80s one-liners. Laughlin, who's dying by chainsaw, says, look, he doesn't tell them, like, I'm dying, you guys need to get away. He doesn't say that. He says, like, and it's just perfect 80s dialogue, he goes, I'm going somewhere, but not with you. Buzzsaw took care of my traveling arrangements. Don't let us down. I don't want to be the only a-hole in heaven. Like, no, that's not what you're going to say when you die, But if you're in an 80s movie, yes, that's exactly how you're going to talk as you die. That's why I love this movie. After the death of Buzzsaw and the takedown of Dynamo, Killian offers Ben an offer. Ben, unsurprisingly, refuses by ripping the camera off of the wall and destroying it. And then we're introduced to our next themed villain, Fireball, who demonstrates his fire skills, and to show off, he flies off with a jetpack. It's during this time when Killian realizes that he's no longer in control of his own show, as the audience starts betting on Richards making the next kill. Unknowingly, Ben has become a star and the figurehead of the people. Fireball flies in and chases after Ben and Amber, who continue to exchange a flirty back-and-forth rapport with one another. For a guy who has long-range pyro capabilities, by the way, Pyro could do a better job at taking out Ben from a distance. His thoughtlessness allows Ben to just start tossing oil-filled barrels at Fireball, which results in an explosion that shows that Fireball is fireproof. Amber then realizes that the winners of the Running Man don't survive, despite what the commercials may have told the audience. Fireball might be fireproof, but he's not immune to the powers of Arnold's one-liners, which include, how about a light, and what a hothead. It's at that point that our head stalker is called for duty. Jesse, the Body Ventura's Captain Freedom, who rejects the flash and pizzazz of the games and wants to go in unadorned. Now, they've been teasing this character throughout the entire movie, and until now, I thought that Ventura was hesitant about going back into the games as he's grown soft from success and not having to perform. To Killian, he argues that 10 years before, the Running Man was less flashy and garish. So, I mean, the answer is probably a mixture of both. Is he just hiding behind his excuses? Probably. Ben is brought into the underground resistance while Killian doctors footage to suppress the resistance with false footage of a cage match style fight between Jesse the Body Ventura and Arnold, beating each other senseless and throwing each other into barbed wire fencing before Captain Freedom impales fake Ben on a spike-studded wall. Now, this predates the 1990s wrestling trend of extreme wrestling, by the way, but this match looks very, very ECW. One of my only complaints about this movie is that that's it that we get for Jesse the Body Ventura Arnold Schwarzenegger showdown. It's just a fake match. Which, that could be a commentary on Jesse's wrestling background, but honestly, who doesn't want to watch these two powerhouses go at it? On one hand, I like that Captain Freedom hid behind his excuses, but at the same time, I mean, when you get Jesse the Body Ventura and Arnold Schwarzenegger together, make the most out of it. That's two co-stars of Predator, for Christ's sake. That's two future U.S. governors. Have them go at it. With fake Ben killed, Killian thinks the heat is off, but what he doesn't know is that the resistance is building around Ben, who is now moving against Killian, making good on his promise of coming back. Ben and company storm the network while the resistance takes over the satellite feed. The people see the truth as Ben storms in with the one-liner, "It's showtime." We're then reintroduced to Dynamo, who gets creepily rapey before being electrocuted. And then it all comes down to Killian and Ben. Killian tries to wheedle his way out of the situation, blaming television for it, and Ben gives him a taste of his own medicine by throwing him in the Running Man pod and sending him on his way. What's never explained is why Killian's pod explodes when it lands on a billboard. But it's 1980s, and that's the end, so we know there needs to be an explosion. And then, oh my god, it just couldn't get any better. I didn't think that it could, but it does. It so does. Amber shows up with a fantastic 80s theme, which, as you'll know, opened this episode of the podcast and will close this episode of the podcast. And I'm thinking about just making it the permanent theme of the podcast from this point forward. Now, in my review of Silver Bullet, I talked about how that movie was the most 80s of King adaptation so far. But this one, sorry, Corey Haim, but this one clearly dethrones Silver Bullet. Arnold Schwarzenegger picks up that wheelchair and just throws it off of the bridge, which, even though it's landing in some water, no doubt explodes. So, this movie is just great. Not only is it just a nice snapshot of the ridiculousnesses of the late 80s and the sensibilities at the time, but in 2015, it speaks to our reality television world. Sure, things look a little bit different. That particular style of game shows is not as prevalent as what reality shows are today, but with reality shows being scripted and thereby fake, I think that says a lot about what is occurring within the confines of this particular story as well. And then it depicts the media, which doctors the truth. It doesn't matter which side of the liberal or conservative side you're on. News networks cater to their audience, to a specific ideology. With, the news in our world is always doctored to be palatable to your specific leaning, whether it's, conservatism or liberalism. So that there also speaks to what's going on in this story. So, comes time for the great head-to-head competition between the book versus the movie. So, The Running Man as a television show in the book, or The Running Man as a television show in the movie. I'm going to go with the movie because it's just so larger than life. The rules are just laid out clearer. It's very immediate tension and conflict. I think that the book can be improved upon, so I'm going totally with the movie. The Hunters versus the Stalkers. The Hunters were what they were called in the book. The Stalkers are what they're called in the movie, and I'm so going with the Stalkers because they're faceless in the book. Like I said, each one in the movie has a very distinct theme. Each one has a very cartoonish, larger-than-life personality, which is just great. It's awesome. I love it. So Stalkers all the way. Killian in the book versus Killian in the movie. It's Richard Dawson. Seriously, you get Richard Dawson in the role of a TV game show host. How am I not going to go with Richard Dawson? And then Ben Richards, Ben in the book. We have this hard-boiled Ben. I don't like anything. My wife's a prostitute. There's the child who's sick. Whatever. I've seen that Ben so many times. It's been parodied to death by the time the 1990s came around and everything was really grim and gritty. And then we have Ben over here played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm going to go with the king of the 1980s movies action stars, and that is Arnold Schwarzenegger. It is a clean sweep across the board. The winner is very decidedly 1987's adaptation of The Running Man.
All right, everyone. May you have long days and pleasant nights, and I will see you here next time where MOON spells Stephen Kingcast.